Hey there! You're probably wondering why this video is being uploaded again, and why it has my old avatars in it when I have these new, fresh, shiny ones.
Oh no, he's hot!
YouTube hit the original video very hard in their search to the point where you couldn't even get the video when you searched, even when you typed in its name, and then decided to make it mature only. So, the original is still up and I'll link it in the description, but I just need this up here because I actually want this video to be seen. So, I guess at the end of this, I want to say,
Fuck you, Susan! You piece of
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
so, let's talk about
Can you please stop punching my TV?
Salt.
Deal with it!
You never see it coming. You see that my mind is too fast for eyes.
So a few months back, I made my video about the train wreck that was the live-action Mulan movie, and I made an obvious joke in it. As it turns out, Mulan's already got magical chi powers and a master martial artist. You know, that kinda gives me flashbacks to something.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it! Ah!
Great! You owe me a TV, mate.
Little did I know that people would take the wrong way and immediately assume things and my opinion about Korra, when if people actually pay attention to the line before, they'd realize my train of thought was that I was referring to the overpowered chosen ones, especially when they're born or young. Personally, that sort of writing trope gets under my skin since it tends to be overused and makes the characters who are born to be undermine a lot of the development, Mulan being a prime example. However, many people took that to mean that I believe that a character like Korra from Legend of Korra is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue. And you wanna know something? They'd be absolutely right.
I'll murderalize you! But wait! There's more!
While yes, I do have my reasons for considering someone like Korra as a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue, my stance is more nuanced on the character, especially since my thoughts for that only apply for the first and possibly the second season of The Legend of Korra. So if you give me about a few minutes of your time, I'm sure we can get through this without ripping each other's teeth out. As is the case with every discussion of this topic, the best way to start is to explain definitions. Part of the reason why people often use the term Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue is because it's mutated so much over the course of being on the internet. It's a reason why so many people are willing to say some of the stupidest shit about it.
I don't buy the Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue thing anyway. I find the term sexist. I don't think there's a thing called Ryan Craig.
You absolute leech!
As much as I hate it when people will jump into situations they don't know much about, and I used to be one of those idiots, mind you, I hate it when people jump into a conversation about writing tropes with a different perspective and don't even bother to even entertain if the other side is even using the same standard. It's a sad after effect of the internet that people are willing to not even pay attention to what someone says and merely shoots themselves in the foot because of it. But enough of me trying to provoke the idiots in the comments section who obviously don't understand that I'm baiting them into leaving comments to add traction to this video. Let's talk about Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue. The thing about the term Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue is that it's really nebulous, and as much as like how most of the internet likes to butcher words, that's a problem. Getting back to Korra, I had a lot of people link me to this video when I made my video, which aside from the fact that this is an opinion piece, it has some flaws. Which granted, this video was made back in 2017, but if you actually go to the source page, it says this is for reading purposes only, not to mention whether or not these definitions or traits of a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue are held to universal standards has yet to be seen. Though on the fact that this website is written by one person, I don't know, maybe since I'm not really invested in doing a full-on investigation of this site, there doesn't seem to be any real way to confirm that this person is a professional writer or not. There's also an obvious bias in the author of that list. You see, the thing with titles such as Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue or something more innocuous like, say, Gen 1er for example, if we're talking about Pokemon, there's a common misconception that you have to have all the traits that are listed or else you're not insert title here. Obviously, there are exceptions to this, however, that's where we get to the nuance that I was talking about, and to point out this is a form of logical fallacy, the no true Scotsman.
You've done it now.
And to save some time, it essentially means that when someone says something that is defined by something, instead of hashing it out, the claim is altered by going from a universal to specific and failing to give any objective criteria for that specificity. While I disagree with that video's source as to what constitutes a Ma-Rey-Suu, that right there is the issue, that there are so many factors to that of a Ma-Rey-Suu character. That there are levels of a Ma-Rey-Suu to characters. Let's face it, there are characters that people simply don't like, and for a plethora of reasons, I like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but frankly, one of my biggest complaints with Part 5 is Giorno Giovanna himself, the main character, and that's mostly due to the fact that other characters put him on a pedestal. He doesn't have that much of a personality save for his dreams, and Giorno, despite being the son of Dio, arguably the most iconic villain of the series, the story does nothing with that fact. We'll be getting back to Giorno later in this video, but keep that in the back of your mind for right now. And there are people who are willing to call him a Gary Stu, and that's due to the fact that there are traits that fall in line with these stereotypical characters. And this is something that can be applied to every character in existence, in my opinion, that you can find traits of these overly powerful characters, but to different levels and degree. Obviously, some more than others. Korra is actually a pretty good example of this because, and if I say that Korra has attributes of a Ma-Rey-Suu, I'm not saying she's a perfect character, as much as people will love to jump onto that claim. Rather, I'm referring to the fact that she had attributes that I would consider to be Ma-Rey-Suu-ish. And take note of the word I used there, had. Yeah, that's kind of important later on in the video. You see, to me, there are several factors into what can be put into a Ma-Rey-Suu's character. One of those factors would have to be the chosen one at birth trope, essentially a character that was born with a great amount of power or fate. Like I already said, I don't like the trope in fiction, and as I feel that it's been played up way too much. But doesn't that mean by your logic, Aang is also a Gary Stu? I'm glad you asked that, straw man, because people automatically assume that I'm giving Aang a pass on that, when I'm not. You see, while I do admit Avatar is good, I don't think it's a perfect show, and I do have my issues with it. Just because Aang isn't what you'd classify as a Ma-Rey-Suu, I don't think I can really say that he's a prominent case, just because he's born with the power. Not to mention, there's more than one factor as I would consider Korra to be Ma-Rey-Suu-ish. One of the bigger factors would have to be, well...
Oh my god, shut up!
What the fudge fickle?
Yeah, that sort of raised a red flag as to why you consider someone to have traits of a Ma-Rey-Suu. Another is when Korra gets her airbending, after supposedly Amon sealed her bending away. I don't know, maybe that's the writers playing fast and loose with whatever rules they had, but it still makes it extremely convenient for the plot. Then there's also the mess with the relationships. I don't want to make an entire video about Korra, so to make a long story short, Season 2 made Korra brain dead when it came to the bad guy, but Korra got... better? In the last 2 seasons, though, I will say that things were a bit rushed, but I wouldn't say Korra was a Ma-Rey-Suu in those. She had actually developed and grew out of her Ma-Rey-Suu tendencies. I just think that she's not a character that I like or I think is all that great, but a Ma-Rey-Suu? No. You see, typical Ma-Rey-Suus, in my opinion, tend to be young and talented, a prodigy in the system such as magic or weapons, while also having a unique ability that no one else has but alone does not make a character a Ma-Rey-Suu. In order to be a Ma-Rey-Suu, your personality has to be absolutely boring and your character arc has to be absolutely non-existent, as in staying perfect throughout the entire story. Korra certainly doesn't fit that molding, but then again, we go back to the levels and traits of being a Ma-Rey-Suu. The thing is, the term is super subjective and overly used nowadays that people are willing to label people as sexist for even daring to use the term? I hate it when people do the following when it involves this term. They use the term as if it has a universal definition to it, without actually explaining it. They attack people who use the term, and they don't define their term so people don't actually know where the hell they're coming from. Now, I'm making it clear here, I don't like Korra.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
I don't like her show. I don't think it's really well written, and I'm aware of the issues that it had when it was being made. But it isn't because Korra is a Ma-Rey-Suu. She does have some traits in the first couple seasons, but at worst, I'd say she evolves from being a character that skirts on some of the Ma-Rey-Suu traits that you can find on TV tropes. And people tend to focus on that a Ma-Rey-Suu can only be perfect, but that to me is a dumb thing to focus on when being overpowered is also a trait that can be attributed to Ma-Rey-Suus. Perfection isn't the only sign of a Ma-Rey-Suu, it's just one of the signs. and not one that needs to be extrapolated upon. But as I said, I'm not making this video all about Korra. So let's move on to a more prominent example, shall we?
And I...
Diabetes.
Boo!
Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuuuue?
Oh yeah, we're gonna beat this dead horse. I think it's safe to say that a lot of people are in agreement that Rey Palpatine, no, I will not call her a Skywalker. In my opinion, she is what is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue. Which is sad because there was a lot of potential in the first of the new trilogy, especially showing that there was a lot to work with, considering Rey. And people could forgive a lot of what could be considered traits of a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue when it came to the character. Her being able to use such complex force powers such as the Jedi mind trick, her being really good with a lightsaber to the point that she's able to be Kylo Ren in the first time, but people were willing to forgive all that because it was all about the Star Wars name. It was back and the trilogy was going to save everyone from the prequels. Honestly, I find it really funny that people are singing a different tune now the trilogy is completed and how Disney royally screwed up the IP. I find that really funny. But we're getting off topic. While we still had parts of Rey that can be considered a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue-ish, most people were willing to give her a chance since it was the first episode of the new trilogy and that there was a lot of potential to be had. A lot of stories could have been told. All of it wasted and thrown down the trash, and Rey essentially became a huge waste. She now has a family tied to Palpatine, she's able to catch on to Jedi techniques, and able to do things that shouldn't be possible. Like, say, deflecting Sith lightning with 2 lightsabers after it was shown that the lightning was able to blow up an entire fleet of ships.
Technically, you can block Sith lightning with a lightsaber, but only if you're trained.
And not whatever shitty fucking training that Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue went through.
Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue?
And you know what the saddest part is? This could have easily been fixed if it wasn't for the fact that Rey wasn't as entertaining as a wet stick. No, I'm sorry. That's not fair. That's not fair to wet sticks, since there's a lot more you can do with a wet stick. It was wasted potential, and frankly that's something that really sucks about characters that can fall into the camp of a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue. Rey is probably the most prominent example of the worst a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue can get in modern media. She's boring, she doesn't have any consequences for her actions. Things get handed to her, she's not perfect, but overpowered, like holy hell is she overpowered. Now, people have actually defended Rey's Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue claims by claiming that Luke and Anakin Skywalker are just as bad Marty Stews.
You're a fucking idiot.
Yes, these are things that people have seriously used in order to defend Rey. Which, not only is that a stupid defense since it's but this guy also, so therefore, like that actually negates any argument that Rey is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue. But it opens up serious questions if these people even watch the films. Now, the prequels aren't as bad as people make them out to be, but they aren't great movies either. But to say that Anakin is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue is kinda dumb. Especially considering that the crutch of the entire trilogy is showing that he makes a ton of mistakes that lead him down the path of the dark side. His flaws lie in his overly emotional states, and how his emotions are what lead him to make some very terrible decisions, despite the advice he's been given throughout the entire training as a Jedi. As for Luke, he was a young upstart rookie. He wasn't perfect, he had plenty of time showing that he was flawed as a character. Rey, on the other hand, while she has a tragic backstory and obviously has a backstory that can lead on to having some skills, it really jumps the shark when she's able to do a trick like she's never done before and able to do it perfectly. This is why people do not like Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuues, and Rey happens to have more reasons for why people believe she is one. Let's go through a list, shall we? Using the Force without being taught to the level people have been using it and training all their lives. Flying a ship she's never controlled before like an ace pilot. Even if you want to say that this is the same as Luke and Anakin, at the very least we had some establishment that they knew how to operate vehicles while Rey does not.
I bypassed the compressor.
Also, it's a bit bothersome that she's treated a better pilot than Poe, considering in Rise of Skywalker that this is supposed to be his thing. Pulling off a mind trick without being taught, which she couldn't possibly even know was possible with the Force. She also probably couldn't have known telekinesis was possible either, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say that this power could have been more well documented, but Jedi mind tricks? No! escapes by herself, is one of the most powerful people Luke has ever seen, fighting with a staff so well that no professional training in how that translates into lightsaber fighting is beyond me. Able to speak both droid and Wookiee, the latter of which is ridiculous because there's no way she could have ever met a Wookiee before Chewbacca. In The Last Jedi, she knows how to swim despite living on a desert planet all her life. Lifted all those rocks and held them easily while Luke was struggling to lift 3 tiny rocks and couldn't lift the X-Wing. Heck, she lifted those rocks better than Yoda. Killing trained stormtroopers with a blaster she didn't know how to use a few hours ago, and her second ever shot was better than they ever could be with her years of training. Her first shot with the Falcon's gun was a triple kill on the TIE fighters. Her skills with engineering, even though she was able to be self-taught, which is a stretch in and of itself, she has more skill and is believable considering her background. Beating the highly trained Patriotic Guard, and doing better against them than Kylo. Beating Luke. Perfectly morally good. No self-doubt. Unlike Luke. Why would she have self-doubt anyway? Who needs it?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
She's liked by everyone. She impresses the Han Solo in all 5 minutes. BB-8 likes her immediately, so does Finn. Leia hugs her first before Chewie. All the Resistance somehow love her so much that she gets the map to Luke and Skywalker and a free spaceship so she can show off to him how awesome she is. Even Kylo is falling for her. Look, we can argue all day whether Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue is a misapplied term, but that doesn't deny the fact that Rey's capability as a character and relative to her training far outshines every character in Star Wars, including the supposed chosen ones, Luke and Anakin. Luke's first time with a lightsaber gets wrecked by a training droid shooting at him. Rey's first time with a lightsaber beats Kylo Ren, who has trained his entire life and is shown to be powerful and skilled enough to block blaster bolts in midair. Luke loses an arm, loses his guardians who brought him up, has the worst father ever, is lied to by his mentor twice, leading him to kissing his sister like
what the fuck?
Saved many times by his friends and has to go through a grueling training under a reluctant Jedi Master who talks backwards. Anakin also loses his arm for being an idiot, has no father, his mother dies in his arms because of his failures, his wife dies for the same reason, he gets burnt up by lava, fights in 2 massive wars, Clone and Rebels vs. the Empire, and is relegated to a claustrophobic suit where every waking moment is painful. Like, how the frig does he go to the bathroom in that thing? Answer me that question now!
That was fucking cringe, bro. I don't know how you made that voice, but, yikes.
He is manipulated heavily, becoming a mindless servant for a man who lied to him, and is ultimately sacrificing himself, getting painfully electrocuted in the process to save his son. Anakin and Luke are helped heavily by mentors, saved by multiple people at every turn, and fail a lot. Particularly Anakin, who ultimately doesn't get redeemed. And these two are the chosen ones. Meanwhile, when Rey is captured, she frees herself, she goes to Luke for training, she doesn't need it, she blows Luke's mind with how powerful she is. Luke didn't ever do anything with that with Yoda. When she fights Luke with a stick, she beats him, even though he's been training decades in how to fight with a blade, and she started a week ago. At least that's how the... that's how the story's written. Rey has attained a greater power level than Luke already, with no training or struggle or anything. It's not surprising how people take issues with Rey, and why so many people are still willing to defend her because, I don't know. And yet, even despite all of that, I'm willing to say that this is an objective stance. Except when I say everything is objectively true and I say everything is true that I say.
Oh, by the way, I was being sarcastic.
Well, duh.
There is a lot wrong with how the last Star Wars films went. How they're managed, and I'm sure people would love to see another person pissing on that garbage fire, but that's for another time. So, unless you've been stuffing mashed potatoes into your ears or somehow collapsed your own ear into itself, you should have noticed that I do not think that Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue equals perfect character, but rather an overpowered character that breaks the rules of the world for no reason, is liked by a lot of people and their enemies, has advantages over their enemies, and can be boring as all hell.
Deal with it!
And with the examples I've given, Korra, who had traits of a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue, but someone I wouldn't call a prominent one, and Rey, who is more clearly of the same camp, I hope you at least see my perspective at this point. And that's the big issue of Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue and its usage of it. No one can seem to come to a clear definition of it, or bother to explain what a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue is so the audience can get an idea of where their complaints are coming from. And that's when you get people throwing the misogyny card, something that I have no doubt that a lot of people are going to be throwing at me simply because I'm talking about this topic in a nuanced sense. Even though I'm going to bet that at this point most people have clicked off the video. Thanks, YouTube analytics! So, let's get back to Jojo, and sticking with the Giorno Giovanna example and apply my own standards to him. Let's start with his stand ability, a power that is pretty OP and can be used in a variety of situations, as well as allow him to basically heal not only himself, but other people with his power. Something that the obvious superior Jojo, Josuke Higashikata, couldn't do himself!
You gotta be fucking kidding.
He could use his power on everyone else, but not himself. Gold Experience is a terribly designed ability with so many flaws and contradictions, which I'm gonna go through right now. The idea is simple. Gold Experience punches something and it will temporarily turn into a biological plant or animal of its choice. There's no specific rules regarding the mass of the object he transforms into a living organism. He can turn a suitcase into a small frog, or turn a tiny brooch into a new hand for himself. This is the first problem with Golden Experience. It's fundamentally broken because it breaks any and all rules. That's not even getting to the fact that it has a bunch of rules that made no sense. Like, any animal or plant that he creates is invincible. If you try to hurt it, the force of your attacks will be redirected at you. Also, if he punches a person, his life energy overflows through their body and heightens their senses greatly. This was actually pretty awesome against Bucciarati before it was never used again! I get the idea that most of the enemies that Giorno fights are stands, and they probably wouldn't get experience like that. But it's just completely useless! And as I stated before, Giorno has the ability to heal his allies by turning things into organs, and he can even use it for himself. When his hands get cut off, he doesn't even wince in pain. In fact, he doesn't even seem to feel pain.
Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuuuuue?
This is supposed to make him look like a stoic badass, but instead it just makes him look kind of bored. His squad and enemies feel like thinking, breathing, living characters. Some enemies have so much resolve you almost feel like rooting for them as they stop at nothing and give everything to accomplish their goal. Giorno doesn't seem like that because he just looks so bored and acts like he already knows the exact solution to win in this problem, and most of the time that's actually true. Like, a good example is when they're on the train and when the characters start aging up, Giorno immediately realizes why Trish isn't aging like they are. Why does he know this random fact?
Okay.
Toss in the fact that his father is Dio/Jonathan Joestar. Look, if you don't know Jojo, it's a long story. Here's the cliff notes. Dio lopped off Jonathan's head and took over his body, and then, like, over 100 years he connected it, and, and that he's got a tragic backstory, that he's got a connection to the major villain in the JoJo series, and it's just like, it's a complicated family. Like, there's a ton of red flags that scream at me that Giorno can fall into a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue based on my own credentials. And don't get me started on the Deus Ex Machina that was the ending of Part 5. That really just makes Giorno into a... But at the end of the day, people can still like Giorno, and that's where we have to ask the question. Since I'm getting back into this topic, I figure I might as well add a little bit more to the video, so that way there's more to this than just the base. And hey, consider it DLC that you guys get for free. Speaking of that, I want to take a moment and talk about video games and Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuu's and Gary Stu's. It's an odd beast to consider if those actually exist in video games, and this is something that I want to pose to you guys as a question. Do you think Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuu's and Gary Stu's actually exist in video games? I certainly think one could make an argument that some side characters could fall under the umbrella of this category. One such character I've seen be called this is Ava from the Borderlands games, or the only game she's actually in, Borderlands 3.
Ava, I'm trying to keep you safe.
By just ditching me on the ship? You said I could be a vault hunter like you! You promised!
You will! When you're ready.
That's all you have to say. Maya's dead because you wanted to open the vaults. We should be hunting down the Calypsos and making them pay for what they did.
It's not that easy.
Maya always told me a vault hunter runs toward the fire. All her stories were about you. You saved Pandora. You killed Handsome Jack. You're supposed to be the Firehawk.
I don't know what I am.
Figure it out, Lilith, before you get someone else killed.
Goddamn demon!
Let's just say, I think I can see where some people are coming from with their hatred of this character. Although from what I've seen, I'd classify her as a poorly written and terrible character, as opposed to a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue. Although, don't get me wrong, from what I've seen, it's very tempting to put that label on her. Especially when the game doesn't want to get on her ass for being the reason why a character died.
Oi, where are you off to?
But with video games, it's hard to determine whether or not a character is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue or a Gary-Stu, especially considering that a lot of games put you, the player, in the role of the main character. So in a sense, by design, you're supposed to be the center of the universe. So is it necessarily a bad thing for this medium? That's really up to you to decide. However, there are two series, especially as of late, that I do think exemplify the player as a Mary and Gary Stu, Pokemon and Persona.
Oh, there's a big surprise!
Pokemon tends to be the more egregious case, so let's start there with the recent incarnations. Sword and Shield. Controversial titles for sure, but some I think should be discussed, especially considering by the time I get this video out, we'll have reached Pokemon Day, and I need an excuse to put Pokemon in the tags. Gotta get them clicks, baby.
Oh, is this a real Sinnoh
A certain
game?
village bustled.
I just threw up in my mouth.
Still doesn't look very... Oh, God.
What the frig is going on right now? I am very confused.
Oh, you've gotta be kidding me!
One of the biggest issues I've found in recent Pokemon titles is that you're perceived to be this great up-and-coming champion and trainer. Even before actually battling you, you'll have characters who will shower praise upon you or consider you to be a great trainer. Not helped is the gimped challenge that Pokemon games have offered in recent years, but it still feels like you're already destined to be the greatest trainer in the world here. Everyone's convinced that you are, even your rivals. You know, the last people you'd think would want to lose to you? Now, Pokemon's not known for its deep and enthralling stories, but this is a good example of characters who often get so much handed to them that they are loved by almost everyone. It's something to consider. Hell, even the major antagonist in the last games, Rose, he even sees you as a great trainer when you first meet him for the first time. Personally, I'd prefer a message that says you can be great even if you're not a chosen one, but what do I know? I'm not some guy who writes, I'm just some loser on YouTube. Which is a good lead into the Persona series. Now, this is a series that I do enjoy, but when you consider the main leads of the past three major titles all have what can be essentially classified as harems, have the respect of even their enemies, and can pretty much be suave characters, I can see the argument for how they can be considered Gary Stews. But to counter that, I like to point out that in order to get to that status, you have to do so many stupid things, such as studying, cleaning, taking care of plants. You have to build up your social stats in order to reach that level. So while I can see the argument, I don't think it'd be applied easily, especially if you don't have specific levels in a social stat. You won't be able to choose the cooler and more amazing options.
That's it, you're on my shit list. Effective immediately.
Still, I'm actually curious about this subject, and let's see you guys have any examples of Mary and Gary Stews in the comments below that come from video games. Give me an idea, guys, and I might make a part 2 to this. So, I hope you, at the very least, understand where I'm coming from when it comes to my ideas about Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuues, more specifically on how I would classify them. And if you do, you can understand why some people take issue with these type of characters. So, here's a question. Why do people still like characters like Giorno Giovanna, especially when there's a ton of issues with how the character is portrayed? It's because the character can still be entertaining. Like, there's a lot you can forgive when it comes to characters like this. The overly powered characters. Maybe it's because you can identify with the character's struggles. Maybe it's because there's seriously a badass moment that just sparks some creativity. Perhaps you just like the story the character's in. Or you just, okay, maybe that's just a power fantasy thing, but whatever. The thing is, when it comes to overly powered characters, there are reasons why people like these characters, even if some people can label them as Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue or whatever. Let me make this perfectly clear. Characters who are competent and heroic are not what make a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue character. The reason we like characters, no matter their gender, no matter their race, no matter their skin color, is because we can see parts of ourselves in the character we love. People love to see characters who are like them overcome situations. When we see Luke Skywalker trying to connect with his father, trying to pull him back from a lifetime of mistakes and attempt to save him from the dark side, it's something that can tug at the people's heartstrings. When we see Josuke from Jojo Part 4 break down and get angry after seeing his grandfather die, seeing how it affects him, you feel for the guy since everyone can relate to losing a loved one. And the same can even apply to Giorno Giovanna, when he learns the tragic truth of Bucciarati. They're more down-to-earth characters, and that's what makes characters great. They aren't perfect, they aren't prodigies, they have to struggle in order to acquire greatness. We want to see these people succeed, we want to see them struggle and come out on top. Without that struggle, you lose people who legitimately see these characters and lose humanity to them. And as I keep saying, What I just said is subjective, and people are more than welcome to like characters who I think are Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuu's. I'm not about to take that away from you. Perhaps you have a different standards, and that's what makes us humans to be beautiful, that we can have different opinions. The problem is that people don't respect other opinions, and if people get things wrong and you can prove it, go for it. But yelling that people are getting things wrong is not a criticism. And just shoving Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue onto characters without explaining yourself is a terrible thing to do, in my opinion. Call those people out for not explaining themselves, that's perfectly fine. Just don't call them misogynist, since the term in and of itself is not that. It's just the name of a trope.
One more thing.
I do need to address that sometimes people will often call those male characters power fanties and will decry female characters for the same traits. Honestly, if they're totally OP, I think it's a dumb that they don't have the same level of criticism, but that's just me and depends on the characters in question as well as the context. And this video is getting way too long at this point, so I guess there's one thing to have to do. So, in conclusion, I think Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuue is a poorly used term. Not that it can't be used, but one that is overly abused to the point where people are labeling people things as things they shouldn't due to a lack of actually defining what the term is. And to that I say, Korra is a Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue!
Ma-Rey-Suuuuuuuuue. Deal with it.
Attention and file. March for miles to share our love with the stars above. We mean it duly, cause it's our duty to salute your beauty. Wow. Nobody gets another out of town. There's no denial, you leave us stifled with your radiant smile. Yeah. Move to the beach, you better put on your goggles, cause we're gonna bring the heat.